All right, folks, I'm going to get started a little early so we can hopefully have some time at the end for questions and comments, etc. So I hope you are enjoying Star Trek this year. I hope you are having a lot of fun. We're doing some experiments this year with shorter session times so we can get more content. This is our first year that we have this many sessions, and it's really cool. We've also been trying some new stuff with AV. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, but we're iterating and making progress and like. So I am Matt Eland, and we are here to talk about side quests and side projects and how awesome that stuff is. My job title is actually literally professional wizard. And the number one question I get on that is, no, I did not pick that title myself. That was it's a title we use over at Leading Edge. If you're not familiar with Leading Edge, we're an IT consultancy here in Columbus, Ohio, where we help organizations make awesome things with software development, data science, AI, cloud technologies, and the like. We all are really smart people. And the thing I love about what we do is we really partner with each organization and help them with what they need that's unique to them. So we have wizards and coaches and the like. The coaches would be more of the managerial side of things, and that is no longer me. Instead, I'm a wizard, which means I get to focus on all sorts of nerdy things and learning new things and getting to share new things with other people and help us with strategic problems. So when I'm not doing that, I am doing a lot of fun stuff involving writing and speaking and building side projects and the like, which is why I'm giving this talk. By the way, if you are interested in data science or AI, and you like the .NET space, I have a free copy of my book, Data Science in .NET with Polyglot Notebooks here. So just come on up if you're the first person who wants it. It's yours, and happy to sign it if you want. So I am a little bit of a nerd. This is a kind of an open secret, and we're going to see what that means in a second, because I'm going to show you some of my side projects that I've been working on in recent years, and you'll get to laugh at me. But first, here I have a definition of what side projects are, but I'll kind of summarize it for you. They are a voluntary project that you choose for yourself to take on to do something technical and interesting and fun. It could be software engineering, could be data science, could be AI, could be data analytics, whatever it might be that interests you, but you're taking something on to achieve something new, and it's you that's choosing to do it. Okay? And side projects are awesome. And here's a bunch of things just to prove that I'm a nerd and how I choose to spend my time. So this morning was hard. I'd like to sleep in, and this morning I had to wake up early to help us set up and all that good stuff. I like to sleep in so much that I once trained a machine learning model to predict the amount of time I'd need to spend scraping off my car in the morning so I could spend an extra 3 or 4 minutes sleeping in the winter. My wife and I get along great, but sometimes we have disagreements. One year, we realized that we had differing opinions on whether or not Die Hard should be considered a Christmas movie. And so I did what any rational human being would do in this scenario, and I trained a machine learning model to predict whether or not it's a Christmas movie. Now, in addition to loving my wife, I also love my dog, and he has a hard life. And so I decided to automate him. What I did is I made an AI agent, and I hooked it up to a little stuffed dog with a camera and a speaker bar, and I gave it a voice and speech, and it could look out the window and spot bunnies and bark at them and listen to my commands and the like, so my dog could spend more of his time upside down on the couch just resting. I also am a bit of a nerd, as I have mentioned, and I like my board games. And so when the pandemic hit and I could no longer play One Night Ultimate Werewolf and teach my coworkers how much of a monster liar I am, I decided to train an AI agent to play against me. As I wanted to see, could I use probability and statistics to be able to train something to be a convincing liar and to be able to detect my lies? And it turns out you can. So what can ever go wrong telling an AI how to detect your lies or how to lie to you? I don't see any problems with this whatsoever. I also have built, in the words of some of my former students, what we call Hat GPT. Now, this was not the name that I came up with when I built this thing. What I set to do was to build the Bat Computer /Alfred, which is a command line utility that hooked up to semantic kernel and AI models and all sorts of different skills. And I connected it to my calendar, I connected it to the weather predictions, I connected it to my wardrobe, and I could ask it all sorts of questions, and it could answer me in a reasonable way. But the number one question I'd ask it was, what should I wear tomorrow? And it would tell me which hat and which jacket I should wear given the weather predictions in my area. So yeah, I'm Batman, but also I know what hat to wear, and it's kind of a nice solution there. This was an interesting technical solution, And so when I started noticing my coworkers underperforming, specifically James, our dungeon master, was very bad at scheduling our next game of Dungeons & Dragons, I decided to replace him. And so I built my own dungeon master, and that is able to kind of tell me a persistent story with a game world. And speaking of games, I do a lot of game development. It's what drew me into development to begin with. And so I've done like a game a month. I have done longer game projects and the like, and I've been able to experiment with them. That's very hard to finish a game project, as we'll talk about later on. But it is a fun way of playing and learning. Speaking of playing and learning, when you are interested in something very specific, for example, I was very interested in genetic algorithms back in 01, 02, something like that. I built something to train a digital squirrel to find an acorn and get to a tree, and also figured out a way to herd a rabbit into a killer dog. These are things that I choose to do with my time, but it's also things that help me grow. So if you're maybe getting a couple of vibes here, A, I like side projects, and B, I like to learn. And I like side projects so much that at one point I was working on a side projects tracker. And I was using some artificial intelligence for it, but at the time I wasn't good enough to finish this, and so I sort of left that on the back burner. But these are some of the things that I've worked on personally, and we're going to shift gears here into the meat of our talk, and we'll talk about the journeys we can go on together or individually as we pursue our own passions. And I don't know who here is familiar with the hero's journey structure. Okay, a roughly half of you in this auditorium with me, you're more likely to have heard of Hero's Journey if you know it's from Joseph Campbell or you study writing. But if you are familiar with Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, that really follows the hero's journey story of going from the beginnings of Luke's journey to the destruction of the Death Star. Spoilers. We are going to be following this structure, but because I'm a hack, we're going to be modifying it a little bit to fit the structure of the talk. So we use all 12 of the stages of a hero's journey, but we're going to kind of jumble the order a little bit to make the talk a little bit more interesting. And we will maybe twist the meaning of a few of them, just for convenience. So let us journey onwards. We're going to start out with the ordinary world. Why do we take on a side project to begin with? Why might you choose to do so? So one of the reasons you might choose to take on a side project is that you are finding yourself in a day job where you're doing the same thing you were doing last week, or last month, or last year, or last quarter, and you're not able to grow enough. And that, leads to boredom. And you're finding yourself that you're not really as driven to grow at work, and you're not getting that same sort of spark of creativity that you went into development for, technology, or wherever you're doing for. And so that can trigger a need for something more. Other times, you're going to find that life is on fire. The world outside is just in chaos. There are dumpsters running around burning on fire. Life is giving you a lot of things, and you might need something you can control. You might need something that brings fun into your life. Often, I find that when things are maybe a little harder, I really benefit from having a way of expressing myself creatively. And that can lead me to heeding the call to adventure and moving on to do a side project. So yeah, it's very hard to get an AI to do a keyboard, by the way. I tried, but yeah, that was not hard. That was not easy. So often when we're launching on a side project, we are trying to feed our curiosity. We are trying to say, hey, could I learn this? This semantic curl thing, this is really cool. Oh, these machine learning models, these are cool. Aspire, that sounds awesome. You want to check it out. Or maybe you have an idea of, ooh, wouldn't it be fun if I built a Magic the Gathering card tracker, or whatever it might be. Sometimes you're looking for challenge. Can I take on this project and get a good result? Can I prove to my wife that Die Hard is a Christmas movie? Spoilers, yes, I can. Other times it's, can I master authentication? Can I learn CI/CD and have something working end to end? Sometimes you'll have some motivations that are related to your work. You might be looking to develop the skills that you need to get promoted to the next level. You might be looking to prove to other people that you have what it takes to get promoted or get that new job or whatever it might be. But I think maybe the number one driver for a side project should be a drive to learn and grow, a drive to do something new and to expand what you can do. Now, if you didn't get the memo that I'm a nerd, let's prove it again. I wanted to learn the F# programming language, which is functional programming in .NET. And so I did what any rational human being would do, is I built an air simulation of a space shuttle with a little guy that looks oddly like me, and an airlock that you can open. So I'm not sure what that says about me. But there's no practical value to any of this. But it was a fixed scope way of experimenting with a new technology in a way that's not going to lead to bugs in production at my day job. And it was very fun to do for a few weeks and then move on to something else. Now, I used to teach professionally, and it was a ton of fun. And so one of the questions I would sometimes get from my students was, Matt, I want to do a side project, but I don't know what I should do. What would be a good side project for me? And I would always have to kind of hold my responses a little bit because I don't know what's interesting to you. I know roughly what your abilities are, but I don't know what you care about. And so your side project should really be aligned with the things that are interesting personally to you and not something that's prescribed by somebody else. Now, I got a nice reminder from this from a student of mine, a former student of mine in Discord today in this sessions channel when he reminded me of his side project, where you can look in Discord and see it for yourself because it is something. But he built a Flappy Bird clone, but he didn't just do that. He built a Flappy Matt clone that had a Photoshop of me as Darth Sidious and lightsabers as the barriers. Now, that is certainly a side project you can do. I don't recommend it. But that was within his grasp, and it was easy to explain. Maybe a little harder to explain why you did it, but it was certainly entertaining. So whatever you've chosen, you've decided you're going to go on a journey with your side project. You are now crossing the threshold. You're entering the next stage where you're going to go out and you're going to get started. I'm going to share with you how I get started. The first thing I do is I create a repository. Right now I'm using GitHub as my repo provider. I've done GitLab before, it's great. But I usually will create a public or private repository. I will almost always create a public repository if I am hoping that other people can see it at some point in the future. I will only do a private one if I feel like I'm going to be putting anything potentially sensitive in there or something I might potentially sell at some point in time. And then I will use a license that GitHub recommends. They have some really good documentation on there. I tend to choose MIT, but I'm not going to give you any legal advice because, oh boy, that's something you don't want to do. I will create a README file, and I will choose the appropriate gitignore template, which for us .NET folks would be a Visual Studio, which is not that intuitive, but that's okay. And then the next thing I do is I clone that repository locally, and then I'm going to .NET New or create React app or whatever you're doing in React nowadays. I don't think it's that anymore, but you're going to create your new project in this repository. And you're going to commit it, and you're going to push it, your hello world. The next thing I do is I go into that README file, and I write two things. I write what it is I'm building in a sentence or two. And the most critical thing I do is I say why I'm building it. I am doing this to learn. I am doing this to have fun. I am doing this to experiment with this library. Whatever it might be, I'm capturing my motivation at this point in time so that in a few weeks when things are getting muddy, I can look back on that and say, okay, have I gotten this value? Am I focused on the right thing? Is this the right thing to be focusing on still, right? So we are tracking our scope a little bit here, but we're having fun still. Next thing that happens is we start developing. Developing's awesome. So I start in and I say, hey, let's go in. I'm going to identify the first task I want to work on. I'm going to write some code. I'm going to make that feature. I'm going to commit it, and I'm going to push it. And then I'm going to move on to the next thing I want to do. And I'm going to make that same loop and that same loop and that same loop. And the virtue of this is if I ever mess up and things are broken horribly, well, now I'm just stashing or creating a branch, and I'm going back to something that's in a good state. Okay, so that can be a nice little safety net. I don't usually switch to branches on my repositories until a little bit later on. I usually will commit onto main in the beginning days. So that will help you avoid me in the hallways if you disagree with my choices. That's okay. So we are going to continue on our approach on our hero's journey. We're going to be continuing forward, and the approach that I've found that works well for Matt, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, is to focus not on defining my full backlog. I am not going to be introducing a large agile backlog. I am not going to be introducing many processes. I'm saying, hey, what are the next few things I might choose to work on? And I put them in my README file in just a little markdown like this. And so the next day when I come to start on my project, I'm like, okay, what am I working on tonight? Oh, okay, here are my options. Which one is interesting to me? And the benefit of this is I now have a curated list of things that I agreed that I wanted to do. And if I'm not feeling one, I just move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And if I'm not feeling any of those, well, cool, I'm playing a game tonight. That's fine, right? This is my spare time. We're going to use it in a way that makes sense, and we're not going to force it, okay? The most important thing, I think, with a side project is that you find a consistency and a pattern that works well for you. For me, every night I'm doing something, whether that's writing or building or speaking or resting. I'm doing something intentional. I have a fairly privileged life in that regard, in that my wife and I don't have kids. She's a morning person, I'm a night owl, so I do have a lot of dedicated time. You're unlikely to have as much dedicated time as I do, so you're going to have to find a rhythm that works well for you. But I do encourage you to find something that works well for you and the people in your life, whether it's a half hour a week or whatever it might be. Next question I often will get is, what degree of standards should I have while I'm building things? How much should I care about things? Am I focusing on documentation? Am I focusing on test-driven development? Am I focusing on CI/CD? Maybe. If I'm trying to learn Terraform, my side project probably is focused on CI/CD. If I'm trying to practice test-driven development as my side project, then yeah, probably I am. Otherwise, I might not have the same level of standards I have for my clients as I do with my spare time, which makes sense because if something for my client breaks, it's hurting a lot of people. But if something for me breaks, well, it hurts me and I can fix it, and that's fine. So choose what you want to spend your time and effort on and the value that it gets you personally and the interest that you have in it. I don't like to get bogged down by process. I do have an obligatory warning here. If you do happen to use cloud resources, be very, 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 very careful because they do like to charge you money for the things that you have agreed to spin up. Okay, so monitor that stuff and get consulting with folks and just be careful because I've seen it burn some of my students, and Azure's a lot nicer than AWS in my experience. I'll have Microsoft, but be careful. All right, so we are continuing on in our journey. We are now encountering some of our first tests and our enemies and allies, and we're going to start seeing things that challenge our plans. Now, one of the things you might see early on is a tendency to maybe put in a password or put in a credential or something like that. This is an actual screenshot of Visual Studio and GitHub Copilot suggesting an OpenAI key to me. Now, thankfully, this is a garbage key. But I've seen, before I took the screenshot, I've seen other ones that look like actual keys. Never, ever, ever commit a secret to a Git repository. Even if you correct it and move on, you still have that in your Git history unless you do a lot of cleanup to avoid that. And there are things that will automatically search public repositories for that. Even if your repo is private, there could be some sort of a security incident in the future where it does become compromised. So if you do find that you've committed it, then you need to change your password, you need to change your key or whatever it might be. Instead, you want to use environment variables or user secrets or configuration files that are outside of source control. Depending on whatever language you're using, you're going to have a different approach to this. So as you're journeying along, you're going to encounter some unexpected obstacles. This is not a shocker. We all deal with this every day as software engineers. We try to integrate a new API, and oh, there's some hoops I need to jump through. What is new is you might not have a full team at your disposal to get help with them. You might not have the reputation of a corporation to reach out to a support group. You might not be on a paid support plan. So you have to be a little bit more resourceful as you're going through things. And what we'll talk about in a minute with mentors can help a little bit with this. The other obstacle you're going to find after a few weeks or months working on a project is complexity. And this complexity, unfortunately, typically comes from you. Because I was not focusing on long-term planning and forecasting and things like that, well, I built a system pretty quickly in a way that maybe I shouldn't have, and now I need to start restructuring things. This is where I start to bring in branches when I'm having maybe larger refactoring efforts to correct my decisions from earlier, but that's okay. That's more of an intentional decision. So just keep in mind that your projects will grow and evolve organically. They might not be perfect. That's okay. You're not building a project to be judged on its technical merits. You are building a project for yourself to grow and to feed that passion and desire to learn, okay? I've seen very few projects that have actually hurt somebody in an interview scenario. It does happen, but usually it has to be pretty bad for that to happen. So let us join with our mentors, right? Thankfully, we are not alone on our journeys in life or in our side projects or in many things. There's many people out there who want to help you. Conferences and user groups are fantastic for this. Every speaker here would love to help you on the things that you're journeying forward on. Every person that you interact with at the conference is likely very interested in the things that you're doing, even if your technologies don't overlap. Find people around you and partner with them. Say, hey, I'm getting stuck on this. Do you have any ideas on this? Do you have any libraries you'd recommend? That can be great. Another source of help is through work. Whether it's a current coworker or a former coworker, you can get help from people. Now, I tend to favor maybe more former coworkers than current coworkers because there's maybe a little bit muddier waters there if you're getting paid by the same people, because there can be feelings of maybe an obligation there. But people want to help more than you would think that they would, is my general perspective. Now, let's talk about GLaDOS. We live in a strange world where we have access to large language models, even large language models running locally on your network through Ollama and LM Studio and things like that. You now have the ability to talk to ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot or whatever and ask it for advice. Just understand that it may try to kill you, right? It's going to lie to you. It's not going to understand. But it might help you with certain things. For me, I find a lot of help in validating a approach. I'm like, hey, I'm encountering this problem. I'm thinking this might be a cross-origin resource sharing error. What could I do to try to validate this? Or I'm trying to learn a little bit more about vector mathematics. I'm thinking I'm understanding it. Can you clarify this a little bit more? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit here. But be very careful accepting advice from an LLM because they just don't understand you the way that a coworker might. But they are going to be online at 1 a.m., which is helpful. So let us continue our journey and talk about the big bad. Every project that I have ever been on has had one or more dragons looming on the horizon. These are not literal dragons, thank God, because I could not fight a dragon. But these are metaphorical beasts that you see looming on the horizon. How am I going to take on this challenge? How am I going to overcome this obstacle? How am I going to implement authentication? How am I going to work with this? How is this feature going to work? Now, sometimes those are, what should this even do? Which I can't really help you too much with. Maybe your LLMs can, or your peers can. But other times, it's going to be complexity dragons. Like, I am trying to get past this very technical issue. I'm trying to understand this. Now, a dragon is typically not going to be something you're going to be able to slay in a single session. You're going to take a stab at it, and you're going to step away, and say, okay, that didn't work too well. What's the next step? What's the next thing I could try? But over the course of a few weeks or months, you might find your way through some of these problems. And once you are, you'll feel a lot better about your capabilities. You'll be able to move on. And those mentors can help you as you're getting stuck. Another major dragon that you're going to bump into is scale and scope. If you are being very rosy-eyed and saying, I'm going to take on the world, I'm going to build the world's greatest side project, I'm going to make it amazing, well, you're probably not going to do very well with this project because you're going to bump into some issues with scaling and scoping. I particularly will bump into this whenever I'm trying to scratch that game development itch. What I've learned is that games will expand based on my creativity. My creativity is pretty high. And B, I can solve this through time boxing. I can say, hey, I'm going to spend this much time building this game, and then I'm going to move on to something else. This worked really, really, really well for me a while ago when I did a game a month. I was doing a Coursera course through Michigan State University, I believe, and I did one course a month, and I would have a game that I would build in that month, and I'd deliver it, and I had to deliver it by the end of the month and then move on to the next thing. So giving myself a time box helped me ship things. They're very imperfect. I go back and I play them, and it's like, oh my gosh, Matt, this is ridiculous. Why did you build this? The collision is awful, but it's still fun, and people have sped run some of these things. I have a buddy I used to work with, and he's off now building games professionally. And this is actually what he does to ship games to Steam, is he sets a series of deadlines for himself. He says, hey, I'm going to have my first demo to itch at this date. I'm going to have my demo to Steam on this date. I'm going to have my Steam page on this date. And I'm going to have my release on this date. And now he's got 4 projects that he's working on, and he's time-boxed each one of those 4 projects. And he's now shipped his 5th game this way. They're not blockbusters, but he's making a living off of this, and it's working well for him. So let us shift gears a little bit. When we first start our projects, we have this passion and intensity and excitement about it. And we're gaining so much insights and passion and joy from it. And then time goes on, and well, it no longer quite sparks as much joy, right? We start to say, "Look, man, this is starting to feel like a little bit of a job, a little bit of a slog," right? One of the things that might accelerate this is by focusing too much on process. I found that without fail, for me personally, whenever I try to say, I'm going to have an agile sprint and I'm going to do this in 2 weeks, this is what I'm committing to for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to build out a backlog, that tends to suck all the joy out of my side project and it dies real quick. For you, that might be great because it's a mini time box. So you might want to try that. But for me, I found that even though I'm a planner and I love processes and plans and all these things, it's like kryptonite for my side projects and those efforts. There's a comic from Commit Strip from 10 or 12 years ago, something like that. It's about a guy who's going out and building these things, and he's got this graveyard of abandoned projects. Well, that's me. I have so many side projects I've failed to complete, and I regret none of them. They were all wonderful and perfect, because what each side project is doing is it's teaching you, how do I start on something? How do I architect something? What are the effects of the choices that I make on this, right? You can say, hey, I'm doing the side project, it's working really well for me, or, ooh, I wish I could have done something else, I wish I could have changed direction, or, hey, this is fine, but what about this other idea I have? And you now have a choice. You can continue on this path that you've committed down, or you can start the new project. There's no right answer to this question, right? You think the right answer is to continue on the path. Well, it might be. If it's something that's really worth doing to help somebody else, that might be the answer. But this path also can lead to fire and burnout and just, oh, this thing that was supposed to bring me joy and escape and growth is now an obligation that I feel like I'm just not working on anymore, and I feel so bad about it. Well, that's not what a side project should do, right? If it's no longer sparking joy, that's not great, okay? So my number one takeaway for you on this talk is side projects exist to serve you, not the other way around. Never feel bad about ditching a side project in the dirt and moving on and never thinking about it again. I used to judge myself by the things I failed to complete without realizing how much they were building my skills and my confidence and my ability to correctly build the next thing, okay? Everything you're doing has merit to it. So let's talk about our next phase of our hero's journey, which usually occurs earlier in our story, and that is the refusal of the call. Okay, so usually in a hero's journey, the hero says, oh, do you want me to go off and join the rebellion? No, I'm going to go get some power converters. Right, that's a refusal of the call. So do you have to do a side project? No, get out of here. Go listen to another talk. You don't have to do a side project at all. You can have a wonderful career in tech without writing a single piece of code outside of work. That's a pretty efficient way to get paid. I personally find a lot of joy in side projects, but you might not, right? You might not have that time for it. And you have to really think about the things that you say yes to in life. That's a very hard thing, right? Yeah, this is me, because I want to say yes to everything. I want to say yes to this side project and this book and this article and this conference and all these things. And the more things you say yes to, the worse of a job you do at anything that you are taking on. So be responsible with what you're doing. Don't be afraid to change your mind and back out of something as well, okay? Corey House gave a wonderful talk in 2020 at CodeMash, and he just gave it last hour here, and I'm so happy about that. But he talks about how everything in life has a trade-off. Every decision, every action that you take has a trade-off. And those trade-offs can be very damaging to relationships and the people around you. So you have to be careful. If you find that your side projects are hurting the people around you, you have to think about what your priorities are and what maybe a healthier thing might be. It's okay to say no to something. It's okay to say not now to something. It's okay to say not like this to something, right? It's often healthy to do these things. And this is probably the number one thing I learned as a new senior engineer is the value and power of saying no or not right now, or we can't do this, or we can't do this right now. And that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of experience to understand that. So beyond anything technical, learning to say no politely to leadership was a very valuable skill, and it will serve you well in your personal endeavors as well. I was working on a side project in 2017, 2018 involving an AI trying to escape a network. It was a computer game. It was a roguelike game. It was a lot of fun. I was building it in Angular, and it was going really well. And then I got a .NET manager role. And I said, I really like this side project. I don't want to give it up. I know. I'll make an Angular front end and a .NET API, and they'll talk to each other. And, well, that didn't work out too well for performance for a real-time game. But I still want to bring this back. And this year has been very chaotic, and I've been feeling this need to express myself creatively through this project. But I don't have time for it right now with all the things that are going on, even though my soul is yearning for something like this. So I've been able to say no, or not quite like this. And so I said, what can I drop from this idea? I said, hey, let's drop all the graphics. Let's make a game with no graphics. And so that's what I'm trying. I'm trying an ASCII art game about an AI hacking through a computer network. And it's actually been a lot of fun to start learning about more about security and penetration testing and things like this. And spoilers, it's a ridiculous game about an AI-enabled coffee machine that decides to hack the network so it can serve better coffee to everybody in the network. Ridiculous mad idea. There are going to be times in your life when you cannot say yes to something. There's going to be times in your life when you are working 60-hour weeks, when you have sick family, when you have debt hanging over your heads, when you have crippling illness or depression or whatever it might be. There are going to be times when it is not responsible for you to take on a side project, even if you want to. For me, this was 10 years ago. Actually, about 10 years exactly. I found myself suddenly paralyzed, and I was actually working on that car defrosting machine learning model back in the day. And for a while, I was trying to code from a hospital bed, and I'm like, this is not a healthy thing to be doing. Let's just focus our energy right now on getting better. And that was a hard thing to do. And life will change on you unexpectedly, and that is normal, and that is part of the human experience. But the thing I want you to get out of this is that you might not have time for side projects, but you have some intrinsic needs as a human being that need to be fed. You have a desire to learn and grow personally. You have something in you that wants to express itself creatively by building something, by seeing if something is possible, by experimenting. You have a bent to you to help other people, to learn and to enable them on their journeys. I don't know what it will look like for you in all walks of your life. It might not be a side project in those times. It might be I'm sitting in my hospital bed reading a book or enjoying my time with my family and investing in others. But find some way of learning. Find some way of creating and sharing. Find some way of mentoring and helping. On a very related note, you need to be careful about the expectations you have for other people. When you start judging other people by their similarities to you, that's bad. This is something I had to learn as a new manager because I knew the things that made me a good developer. But my team didn't need to look like me, and they shouldn't look like me for a diversity standpoint. I had to learn that the people on my team who were maybe not amazing at architecting new things were absolutely fantastic at talking to product management, understanding what people needed to build, or working with customers to figure out the bugs that we were dealing with and how to resolve them in an expedited manner. Their skills look different than mine, and that's the point of being a team. So I needed to not judge them based on how they were working with side projects or the like, and I certainly would never want to be having a litmus test of what are you building in your spare time with somebody in an interview process or a promotion process. Because that's how we start filtering out single mothers or caretakers of families. So we got to be very, very careful because other people are going to be great, and the ways that they're great looks entirely different than the ways that you're great. Okay, so be very careful. I had to learn that the hard way. I don't believe I hurt anybody significantly with that, but I did need to shift my thinking as I went through that. So, all good things must end, including side projects, including this talk. We're not quite there yet for this talk, but at some point in time, you're going to kill your side project. You might just say, hey, I haven't worked on this thing in this quarter. I guess it's dead. Okay, cool. It might be this no longer sparks joy, or I'm really interested in this, or I thought I was going to be learning React, and now I'm learning Angular, or there's any number of reasons why you might choose to move on. I'm going to encourage you to do some things when this happens. First of all, say, do I really want to be dead? Because you can say, I'm not dead yet, and let's put some more time into it and revive that project. The other things you can do is say, okay, it's time. Let's archive this. what I would encourage you to do is if you're having a public project that you might want other people to benefit from, put some quick documentation on it. It doesn't need to be extensive. Just put something in the README file. This is what this is. Here's how you configure it and run with it. Here's how you might want to expand it. And the great thing about being alive in the 2025s right now is we have large language models. We can say, hey, here's my side project. Generate some documentation for me because you're in a README file for me. And it'll give you a draft and you can tweak it. The other thing I would encourage you to do is do some serious reflection on the project. Think about what worked well for you and what you would like to adopt into your workday or into your responsibilities at life. I've often played with libraries before introducing them to my team at work. And I can say, hey, is this worth adopting on this project we're considering doing next quarter? Okay, it's not. Let's do something else, right? So that can be really helpful just to do a little bit of thinking. I'm just saying, hey, while you're showering, while you're driving, while you're walking the dog, just spend a little bit of time thinking about the project, what worked well, and then make some decisions on that and move on. Next part of our hero's journey, usually at the end or near the end, is the reward. But the reward of a side project is really just every time you're working on it, every time you're thinking about it, every time it gives you energy. That's the reward. One of the major things you're going to get out of a side project is confidence. You have tackled a dragon. You have tried to slay a dragon. Those technical hurdles, you've tried to see what's possible for you personally. And you might have beaten it. It might have beaten you, but you learned something and you grew. And that will give you confidence, and it'll give you a different approach next time you try something. And I've particularly found this is really helpful for interviews when someone says, hey, Matt, what do you know about cross-origin resource sharing? I'm like, oh, I bumped into that while I was automating my dog. And like, wait, what? Let's get HR and security in here now. But as you do more and more of these side projects, it gets harder and harder to have an interview question you can't answer with a story. Unless they tell you stop answering stories, just give me a yes or no. Which, by the way, listen to the interview. They'll tell you what they want. You don't even have to try to change jobs for it to help you in that role. I've talked about how it can help you with confidence, how it can help you experiment with libraries before you adopt them at work or potentially avoid them. I've also seen side projects have been really helpful for promotion, whether it's for people justifying the jump to senior or getting into a new role as a senior dev. Most recently, a couple of years ago, I was a Senior Solutions Developer 2 at Leading Edge, and we opened up a new path for specialization. And I applied to be our first AI specialist, and I had to say, hey, here's where I know about all these different areas. Well, each one of these things, I had one or more side project, or one or more college course, or whatever more book that I had read, or whatever it might be. And I was able to make a pretty convincing story about this, and they looked at this and say, sure, Matt's our first AI specialist. And I'm not our last AI specialist, and our other ones are really smart, and I love that they teach me new things all the time. It's such a fun place to work. So there are some career benefits to side projects if you want them. There also can be some financial benefits. They're not amazing typically. You can get supporters on GitHub for like sponsors. That's typically if you have a really popular library, you start getting sponsorships, and it's usually to offset some degree of the cost you already have. If you are trying to make a commercial product or a service or something like that, that can be helpful. I have a coworker, Bob, who does some things like this, and he actually is able to sell some services, which is awesome. I have found probably the most benefit financially through writing about the things I've learned, because I like communicating in written form, hence the book I have on the table here, right? That tends to be the most lucrative way of doing things. Though if you do a course through like LinkedIn Learning or something like that, that can be financially beneficial too. Those are harder opportunities to get. But writing on Medium and just getting money as people read it is pretty nice, except for in tax season. That kind of sucks. So you have now reaped your rewards, but you're not done with the rewards, because now we reach the next phase of our journey. We are returning with the elixir. And so we now have our prize, and we're returning back. And we have other people in our community that we care about. And that's just the great part for me, is now I can talk to my mentees, and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about learning this. I'm like, oh, you should check out the side project I did 5 years ago. Here's the repository. Here's some things about it. This is really cool. And you can start sharing that knowledge. And you can help people avoid the mistakes that you made. If you would have done your side project differently, you can give them a little nudge in that regard. So you become a guide to help them avoid something. Like, hey, I know where the bodies are buried. Don't go over here. You probably don't want to do this. This isn't quite ready for prime time yet. You might want to do something else instead. And so this, to me, is maybe one of the most fulfilling things from a side project, aside from the pure joy that it gives me personally. That's just sort of how Matt is wired. But we now talk about our final phase of the hero's journey. This usually occurs earlier in Campbell's, but hey, I'm going to argue with the greats today, I suppose, because why not? And that is resurrection. So I have come back to life. Your side projects, which you thought were dormant, sometimes will come back. For me, the most reliable one is every Christmas, I tend to get some questions about Die Hard and whether or not it's a Christmas movie, and I can tell a story about that. And by the way, yes, it's a Christmas movie. That's what the machine learning models say anyway. But other times, you'll find that from the time when you initially started on a side project to when it comes back up later on, technology has changed and evolved, and you can evolve and change your side projects to deal with it. I was working on semantic kernel when it was in preview, and I built the Bat computer during that phase. That sounds so weird to say. But I built the Bat computer during that phase, and I kind of left it alone since then. And now we have these ideas of model context protocol servers. Well, with a few lines of code changed, my Bat computer can now run in model context protocol mode, where it's a server that's hooked into GitHub Copilot or Continue or whatever LLM solution I'm using in my editor. And now I'm able to talk with it about the skills that I've provided. And it's really super cool. And all I had to do was just a couple of things. Other times, you're going to find new opportunities open up because of your side projects, because of what you dabbled in. For example, I wanted to submit something to KidsMash at CodeMash this year and teach youngins a little bit more about tech. And I was talking to my wife, I'm like, I don't know what I can submit to KidsMash. I don't have any ideas. And she looks at me and she's like, you literally built a talking dog. And so like, okay, that's a good point. And so I did that. You might find that you have one or more white whales of ideas or side projects that you keep coming back to. For me, it's this idea of this AI-based roguelike that I hope to have room for after I finish my book and my conference obligations for the next half year or so. I want to put more effort into that. Right now, my side projects are more dealing with writing my next technical book, which, by the way, is about side projects, so that's kind of topical, and finding little pockets of time to try to stay sane with a half hour a week or so on this AI hacking, coffee machine, crazy mad idea. Likely we'll never see the light of day, but that's not the point. The point is it sparks joy, it sparks learning, it sparks growth, and it helps me be a more actualized human being as I am growing and working. And I think this is really my number one and number two takeaways for you, is you need to keep growing and learning. The time might not be right for you right now for a side project. You might not have the time, you might not be wise to take the time or energy into it. But think about how you're growing right now and your ability to express yourself and learn and grow and develop as a human being, and find some ways of feeding that. It might be taking a quick YouTube video a week or something on something that's interesting to you, conferences like this. It might be reading a technical book or browsing through articles online. It might be writing something to share with somebody else. Whatever it is, try to feed those parts of you because they're important. And you might not always have a lot of time, and that's okay. But side project exists to serve you, not the other way around. So never feel guilty about not doing them, and never feel guilty about leaving them in the ditch to die when they're no longer serving you, because you get a lot of benefit out of them just for the journey that you go on with them. Finally, I want to kind of close with the reason why I'm giving this talk. And it's a book, a very, very, very short book. You can read it probably in a sitting or two, called How to Fight a Hydra. And it's a metaphorical story about life. I read it kind of as a tech metaphor, but I don't think it was written intentionally for tech. But it's about the journeys we go on. And this hero in this story goes out and he fights a Hydra. And spoilers, he is successful in his battle with the Hydra. And now he comes back, and he has these new skills and equipment and gear, and he's being asked to join a group of adventurers to go out and slay a dragon. And it's like, do I stay with where I am? Do I have to challenge myself? Do I have to go? Or do I equip these people to help move forward? And the thing I want to impress upon you is that our lives in tech are a series of main quests with our jobs and side quests with the other stuff we get to do on the side and the other things that we learn about. Okay? And so you get to choose where you're going to use that. And there really aren't a lot of wrong answers in this. And so that's what I want you to take away from. I personally love being able to go on new adventures and learn new things. And I love that we can share them with other people. And so now I segment into commercial here because, hey, but this is actually part of what I get to do as a wizard over at Leading Edge is we get to do things like lunch and learns where we can help people by giving conference talks about Terraform or testing or whatever it might be that are interesting to people. We like to get connected with people in the community. We believe that building relationships can help us find future opportunities. And so we don't charge for these and we don't expect you to employ us. But if you're in that, give me a scan and check a little box that says, hey, I want to do a lunch and learn. I want to find out a little bit more about that. We have a cute, totally not hokey at all menu of options for that, and great speakers like my dear Bob here on the slide. And with that, we have a few minutes left for questions, and I have a feedback form here. So if you want to get in touch with me, get these slides, or ask questions later on, that's a great resource. But thank you for having me. Any questions, any topics of interest? Casey.
For those who, fear of failure is big for a lot of people, and it holds them back from taking that first step. You talked about a lot of constraints and setting your scope. If you have one thing that you can tell people who have a fear of failure that causes them to not make this step, what's one thing?
So if you have a fear of failure and you are afraid of scoping something poorly and making a mistake and not finishing something, I think would probably be your main fear in your question. What would be my best advice? Aim low. Find something historical that's interesting to you, maybe something that other people have tackled before, and tackle that problem. Whether it's building a re-implementation of the old Eliza AI chatbot or building a dice rolling game or something very simple and modular. So keep it very low end if you're just dabbling and want to have something very fixed. Having a fixed scope in mind at the beginning can be very, very helpful. I personally like the creativity of having an open scope, but if you're looking for something very simple, that's fine. Yeah. Yes?
So, how do you deal with having so many projects? I think you talked about it a bit, but I tend to find myself building a project, giving 25%, 30%, 50% there, and then it just drops, and then I just move on to the next thing and the next thing. And I want to feel joy, and I don't. And I struggle so much with it because, got kids, got a job,
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. Give me tips and say, like, here's how you can revitalize joy.
So the question is, how do you get past that 25% marker? How do you keep going on a project when it feels like you're just giving up and moving on because life has gotten busy?
Well, because you know that once I get over the hump, I'm going to love it again. It's going to be great. It's like that hump is so hard to get over.
Yeah, sometimes those humps, those dragons, those little challenges can be really, really, really difficult. I have found that often my best ideas come from walking the dog or taking a shower or driving around. But if you're spending several dog walks or showers or whatever and nothing has come to you, you may want to just kind of have a branch and then move on to something else and come back to it later on. It's okay to rescope your project to avoid something or to embrace something that's more interesting to you. It's okay to say, like, hey, let's focus on refactoring this right now until I feel passionate about building it again, expanding it out. But if the thing that's going to give you the most joy is completing something, aim low and aim for something simple that's expandable, I think would be my best advice to you. Yeah, at my time. Okay. Well, folks, I will be out there in the lobby, and you can put things on Discord and chat with me there. I'm also happy to take questions or comments in the hallway or LinkedIn and the like. But enjoy your last two sessions in your movie, and it's great to be here.